And the other thing you may feel that politicians are struggling to answer is this news on Wednesday that 500 people plus crossed the Channel, the most of any day this year. In fact, the number of people making that deeply dangerous illegal crossing is up 10% on last year, rather blowing the Prime Minister's pledge that he will stop the boats. Joining me now is Harjap Singh Bhangal, a UK immigration lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show. You are really in the front line of this migration crisis here in the UK. Do you think there's anything the government can do or should do to stop the boats?
Yeah, it's quite a lot of things that it should do, but it isn't doing. The first thing is to actually, how about, let's try and get the gangs or the people who actually put these people on the boats and arrange for them to be smuggled into the UK. You stop drug dealing by locking up the drug dealers, not by locking up the drug users. So by locking up asylum seekers and refugees, you won't stop people smuggling. The only way you're going to stop people smuggling is to try and stop these people smuggling gangs at source or on the way. That requires Europe-wide cooperation. Secondly, there needs to be an overseas processing centre. The only way to claim asylum at the moment is by actually landing here. And that is a selling point for the smugglers. They approach these people and say, you want to claim asylum in the UK? You've got to land there. The only people who can get you there are us. We have the product. Do you want to buy it? And therefore, they are actually creating the policy that we have is actually creating the demand and, as a result, the supply. If there was an overseas processing centre like Italy have now established in Albania with their nearest neighbouring country, and we should have done with France. In fact, France offered it to us, and they even offered us the land and help to open this processing centre, and we actually said no to it. And so that would alleviate a lot of people coming here, especially families. They wouldn't take a risk to get on a boat and cross the Channel if they could, in fact, realise that, they can apply while sitting in France. Thirdly, removal rate. So the removal rate since this government came in has been on a downward spiral, and it's gone from like 30, 40,000 down to even 3,000 or 4,000. Recently, it's just gone up a little bit, surprisingly, before the election, after people have created a big row about it. But it's gone down for continuous, regardless of who the Prime Minister was, whether it's Boris Johnson, whether it's David Cameron, whether it's Theresa May. And as a result, people aren't being removed, have been refused. It's taking a year or over a year to process claims, which should be or used to be decided in 15 days.
So let me interrupt you there. You've come up with a few solutions. Now, many of our viewers and listeners won't understand. I know you do, as the immigration guru, as you are known, won't understand the difference between an overseas processing centre and the government's Rwanda policy. So just by way of explanation, effectively what Italy has done in Albania, I'm not sure they've done it yet. I thought it had been held up in the courts, but it may now be happening, is processing people in Albania. And if they succeed in their claim, then they can then go to Italy. What our government, the British government, is proposing, but it's really important we make the distinction here, is that we have a processing centre in Rwanda, but if people succeed in that asylum claim, they remain in Rwanda. And that's the big political debate, actually, in Parliament that we've been having only this week, is about whether it's reasonable, safe or fair to allow people, to compel people to remain in Rwanda. But you say that actually that would be a big disincentive. So if the government does succeed, and that certainly isn't certain, in getting flights off to Rwanda, the bill hasn't even gone through Parliament yet. If the government does succeed with the Rwanda bill, is it your view that that will be a disincentive for people seeking to come to the UK?
No, I don't think that will disincentivise it at all. The Rwanda scheme has been touted for 2 years. That hasn't stopped the boats coming. In fact, a bigger deterrent is the weather. The weather actually deters more people than the Rwanda scheme. Going in, one plane going to Rwanda with a place of about 300 people, that is not going to deter 47,000 other people from coming.
Let me just say, first of all, people often say that the plan is to expand it to many thousands. So if in fact once it's proven and it's up and running. The Rwanda-style scheme has been tried by other countries around the world. In fact, the most famous place it was tried was in Australia. They decided to send, when they had an issue with people coming over on boats to Australia, they removed many people to a place called Christmas Island. I think some other places as well. They have 0 people, last time I checked, 0 people on Christmas Island, because as soon as they brought the scheme into force, the boats stopped coming. So isn't it reasonable for the government to say we could hope to see a similar success with the government's Rwanda scheme? I know you say it hasn't worked yet, but it's not the law yet. But in Australia, when it became law and they started doing it, the boat stopped.
Right, let's talk about something that's already tried it with Rwanda, Israel. So Israel tried it and actually sent people to Rwanda. A year later, they sent their inspectors to see where these migrants were. All had been re-trafficked, all except for about maybe 2 had been re-trafficked and were back into the system and in the hands of these gangs. And Rwanda clearly is not the answer. Countries have tried it before and have failed. We need to look at an alternative if we're going to look for this sort of type of scheme to work.
Well, it sounds like
we definitely know that Rwanda...
It sounds like you're quite supportive of the idea of offshore processing. I've made that distinction. It is a really, really important distinction. And I've said before, actually, I think the government, as an interim step, should have offshore processing in countries. And the countries I picked on, just because I know that there has been some discussion, was Morocco, which I think was, did offer to the British government to do it. There are other things the government's doing. Of course, it's given, you say you've got to tackle this people smugglers at source. We've given over £500 million to the French to do that. It doesn't seem to be working in any way whatsoever. But the other way the government believes it can discourage people from coming is to make their life not particularly pleasant when they're here, if I can put it that way. I don't necessarily think it's what the government should be doing. We've got the BBY Stockholm Barge. We've got military camps being converted. Do you think that is a disincentive?
I just don't think any of these schemes hold any water or are working at all. This is coming from a government who actually thought that driving around vans with "Go Home" written on them would make people want to go home. I mean, it's ludicrous in doing that. These barges are not stopping people. They're limited in accommodation. The costs are huge to the taxpayer. We know that. Even the Rwanda scheme is being touted at £2 million per person sent back. If you're going to expand that, I mean, compared to processing an actual applicant, which is 21,000, this is just not viable. Financially, it's just not viable with the numbers that are coming in. The Rwanda scheme no way can handle 47,000 people in a year. That's the sort of numbers we're seeing crossing over in recent years. It's not going to be able to handle that. And it's not going to disincentivize people. I mean, these schemes are just PR stunts at most. What needs to happen is faster processing, faster removals, better trained staff to make better decisions, offshore processing so that people don't make the journey. Some of them still will. It won't stop all of it. It's not a total, solution. We need a combination of these things and to stop the gangs. Like I said, and this government has failed to stop the gangs.
It may surprise you. There's nothing I actually particularly disagree with you. So I do think Rwanda will work, but I do agree, offshore processing, I've said it before on this show, I also agree with removing people immediately if their asylum claim fails. So there is an area of agreement. I think on that fundamental issue about the way forward, then we may be divided. But thank you very much for joining us here on the show. We do love hearing from you.